Okay, guys, this is the moment, episode 100. I didn't think I would actually get to an episode 100, but to have the guest who was on episode 1, on episode 100, it is not only surreal, it's fantastic. How are you, Brad?
I'm doing great. It's kind of like being on episode, 4.
Yeah, it's like coming back on a TV show. You know when they kill off a character and they bring the guy back? It was all a dream or some shit like that.
I'm delighted to be here.
Well, thank you for doing it. We have a topic today that I think is wondrous. It's fascinating. Who doesn't like to be in love? You have agreed to talk about something very personal, and I appreciate it. Share that with our listeners. It's only between us, and that is how to stay in love, how to stay in a healthy, vibrant relationship as an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur. You've started tech companies, and you've started one of the nation's just premier venture funds. You've done so many things. And so over the next 20 minutes, we're going to learn from you how you can have it all. Do you feel like you have it all?
I feel like I have all that I can handle.
You can't take any more. So let's go back in time, just 60 seconds, if you would. Indulge us the story of how you and Amy met. I've met Amy a number of times. She's just a wonderful lady. How'd you first meet? And give us a time frame.
Sure. So Amy and I met in college. She went to Wellesley. I went to MIT. I was a sophomore. She was a freshman. And this would have been 1984. We were friends throughout college. I had a long-distance girlfriend who was my high school girlfriend. Amy and a gang of her friends hung out at our fraternity, and there were plenty of boyfriend and girlfriend stuff going on there. I married my high school girlfriend, and that relationship, in hindsight, was probably good for 3 days.
Yeah.
Like halfway through the honeymoon, I probably should have realized it wasn't going to work. And we never lived together. We'd had this long-distance relationship.
Yep.
We ended up getting divorced about 3 years later. Amy and I had still been friends all during this period of time, and she actually came to work for my company. She was the 4th employee of my first company.
No kidding.
We had me, my partner Dave, a guy named Sean who was a software developer, and we woke up one day and we're like, we need somebody to do all the other shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so she was there for a while.
But no romantic interest at the time.
Not at the time.
Yeah.
But friends, like my ex-wife and her boyfriend and me would go out, and it's like one of these classic things in hindsight. You look back at it and you're like, well, my ex-wife and her ex,
sure,
would want to go out, stay out all night, and the two of us be like, hey, it's 10 o'clock, like time to go home.
Yep.
Like my idea of a good time on a Saturday afternoon is to lay on a couch and read a book. So was Amy's, and that was definitely not my ex's idea.
Yeah.
So, we were friends. We worked together. Our relationships blew up at about the same time. And we, in sort of classic fashion, one day ended up together. And you're like, oh, that's kind of fun.
Yep.
And it carried from there.
And that was roughly, 25 years ago?
It was like 1990, 90 or 91.
Okay, so close to 25 years. So we can remove any...
1990.
Yeah, so we can remove any doubt. This is the real thing. You've found love, you found your life partner, and you've managed to have this amazing relationship with her. At the same time, if you've built this amazing career. I know early on, especially during the internet craze, when you invested in one of my early companies, you had some difficult times. You were on the road all the time. Tell briefly the story about when you came home that one day and what she told you.
Yeah, so we moved to Boulder in 1995, and I think we wrote about this in the preface of the book that we wrote together called Startup Life. And the subtitle is it tells the story often in the book. So the subtitle, Surviving and Thriving in a Relationship with an Entrepreneur.
Yep.
And the story happened, I can't remember whether it was 2000 or 2001, but it was at the sort of absolute peak of the internet bubble madness. I've always worked a lot. When I was in my first company, I mean, she saw me working 100 hours a week when we weren't together, so she knew what she was getting in the context of that. When we lived in Colorado, I'd literally be gone from Monday to Thursday or Monday to Friday every week. And we got to the place where what she would talk about on the weekend is she'd be getting the dregs.
Yeah.
The dregs in the bottom of a keg of beer.
Yeah, yeah.
And literally, she'd like patch me up on Saturday and Sunday and send me back out into the world. And it was self-inflicted. I mean, I was behaving this way in the context of my work and my boundaries and how I thought about work.
Right.
And we had this weekend that was probably the nadir of the relationship. We went to visit two friends in Newport, Rhode Island, friends Warren and Alana. I was in Boston. Amy flew to Boston. I picked her up in a car, or the car picked her up at the airport and then came and picked me up at the company I was at. I was waiting outside on the phone. I waved hi as I got in the car.
Still on the phone. Yeah. Yeah.
We drove to Rhode Island from Boston, whatever, 90-minute drive, a little bit less. I finished my phone call somewhere, into the car drive, said, hi, how are you? Hey, great to see you. All the happy stuff when you see your spouse after not seeing him and her for a week. And then the phone rang. Hang on.
Oh, boy.
I'll talk on the phone to my friend's house. We get to my friend's house kind of like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And, I've still got a ton of shit to do. And this is back before you'd sit in front of your computer and grind on email. So I'd have like all this printed paper that I was going through and scribbling notes on shit and reading stuff and tearing shit up. And so we sat on our friend's porch on this beautiful, summer day in Rhode Island. And I'm like doing my work and they're having a drink and having a snack. We go out to dinner and we're at the restaurant and we sit down, we order, and my phone rings. So it's Friday night, my phone rings. And at least I'm smart enough not to answer it at the table, right? So I say, this is before caller ID. I got to get this. I think I got to get this. I get the phone. I go out. I talk out in the lobby of the restaurant. I go back to the table, and they're eating dessert.
Oh, boy.
Okay? You get what sense where this is going. We go back to the house, and at this point, it's pretty cold. And, now I'm trying to at least be friendly again, but I've kind of fucked it up completely. We get into bed, and I heard early on something after I got divorced, like never get into bed angry, right? Never go to sleep angry with your spouse. You get into bed, when there's something wrong. Like it's really obvious when you get into bed.
Yeah, there's no doubt, right?
There's just no doubt. And I said, you okay? And she says very quietly, I'm done. And I said, yeah, this was a really long week. I'm really tired.
I'm done too.
I'm so looking forward to a great weekend with you. She's like, no. You're not even a good roommate anymore.
Yeah.
She says, I love you. I think you're awesome, but this sucks.
Yeah.
And I'm done.
Yeah.
I want a divorce. I don't want to do this anymore. And, that was a surprise to me, and it wasn't okay. I wasn't going to accept that.
Yeah.
So I said, no, let's talk for a while. So we talked for about an hour, and we got to the place where, like, she backed off. And I'm like, I gave her my phone. I'm like, you have my phone for the whole weekend. Like, I got it. I fucked up. Like, I didn't just fuck up tonight, but we got a problem. Yeah. We need to deal with this and go deep on it.
And you agreed that there was an issue.
Yeah, I didn't fight it.
Yeah.
I didn't struggle with it. And after about an hour, like, we got back to a happy place. Not a happy place, but a place where it had thawed a little bit.
Yeah.
And I nudged her, and we were kind of getting ready to go to sleep. I nudged her and says, does this mean I'm not getting any tonight? and she laughed. And, it was like that moment, where you reconnect.
Yeah,
like, It's okay. Like, yes, we have a serious problem here, but at least we'll go to sleep and we'll work on it tomorrow. Do
you think that it would have gotten to that point if you were not long distance? Having a long distance relationship?
Well, Amy and I didn't have a long-distance relationship at that point.
Oh, but I thought you were commuting all the time.
I was traveling all the time.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think it would have gotten that bad if I wasn't traveling as much. Maybe not, but the biggest thing that changed in this, there were a bunch of things along the way, after this sort of cataclysmic moment that we changed, but the biggest was foundational, which is my words didn't match my actions.
Yeah. And in a relationship, in any relationship in life, that's all that matters.
That's what matters. The key part of it was, I would say to her regularly, she was the most important person to me. She was the most important. I can hear myself saying, you're the most important thing in my world.
Yeah.
I can hear her as an avowed human being and a feminist saying I'm not a thing.
Yeah.
So I probably wasn't doing so many services by saying that.
Be careful what you say.
But I would say that she was the most important person to me. And then we'd be sitting at dinner, and the phone would ring, and I'd answer it without in the middle of a sentence.
Yeah. Which went against your words, obviously.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Like, what does that make her feel like? So there were a set of things, but the biggest was that, and I don't think the travel was a symptom of that. I think the travel was coincidental with that.
Yeah. So before we go to some of the things that you did and put in place over the course of the 25 years to make this not just work, but it works great. I mean, I've seen you guys together. You've written a book together. You speak together. You give back to the community together. Before we get to that, how did you resolve that particular instance? Did you continue to travel? Did you continue to work? Did you quit the job? You obviously made it with her, so what happened?
Yeah, no, we had a very powerful weekend because we did spend 2 days now fully engaged talking about this. And the first thing we talked about was I said, look, I've got an engineer's brain, so I just need some rules.
Yeah.
Give me some rules to follow.
Yeah, and I can do it.
And I can do it. And her first reaction was, no, that sucks. Like, I don't want to have to give you rules.
Yeah. Because that means somehow it lessens the value of it, right?
Lessens the value. It means that it's her responsibility.
Right.
It's not romantic. Like, there's a long list of reasons.
Which I could understand. Sure.
Right? And I said, yes, but in the absence of rules, this isn't working. So just think of it as your way to control me. and that she liked. And she said, all right. And, every spouse knows, everybody in a relationship with their partner, you know each other's big red buttons in the middle of your forehead.
Sure.
So the very first thing she did when she said, okay, I'll give you some rules. Watch out. I'm going to give you some rules.
This was right at that time, after this conversation.
During this conversation, she immediately pressed the biggest red button in the middle of my forehead. She says, the very first thing I want you to do is I want you to track on a daily basis how many hours you work. Now, the reason that was a big red button in the middle of my forehead was my first company billed by the 5-minute increment.
Yeah.
So for 7 years, every day, I kept a timesheet on paper.
And now you had to do it again.
I fucking hated it. Like, we sold the company, so I'm never doing that again in my life. I'm never keeping track of what I spend my time on.
Yeah.
And my first reaction, of course, was, no way, I'm not going to keep track of my time. And she's like, hey, wait a second, you told me I get to define the rules. I'm like, all right, you're right, and off we went. So there were a set of rules, and many of them were joint. So there were things like on the first day of the month, we have something we call life dinner.
Yep, and you still do that to this day.
To this day, we still do it.
Every month, once a month at the beginning of the month.
First day of the month. And if for some reason one of us can't do it on the first day of the month because we're somewhere else or we have something that we can't move, we just move it a plus or minus a day.
Yep.
And if you're a software developer or an entrepreneur, you'll understand this. We basically do sprint planning and an agile retrospective.
Yep.
So we have dinner. We give each other a gift. So we have sort of symbolism of it. We then talk about the previous month. We each have a chance to talk about what went on, good, bad, other things that we're struggling with, things that we were unhappy with the other person about, things that we were unhappy with ourselves, or happy. And then we talk about the next month. And sometimes these conversations literally last 5 minutes and we have a nice dinner, and sometimes they last 3 hours and there's tears. So we came up with a series of these things. Again, some rules, parameters for me, some joint things. And we really gave ourselves the time and space to be really together when we were together, giving each other feedback on how things were working after we hit this really low point.
And did this also involve you developing quote-unquote rules for Amy?
No.
It just wasn't necessary?
Wasn't necessary.
So you really owned this?
Yeah, and I had to own it, and I had to change my behavior.
Yeah.
And I know how hard it is for anybody to change their behavior. It's very hard. It's easy to say, oh, I'll change my behavior. It's very hard to do it. And it wasn't that it was one directional. I had to change my behavior and she had no part in it. It's that we collaborated in changing my behavior in the context of how we related to each other and changing our joint behavior and how we did things together by having this activity. We never had trouble talking, so we always had good communication. But the problem if you're good at communicating with your significant other is oftentimes you're good at talking, but you're not good at listening.
Yeah.
And this is another thing that I'll bookmark that's sort of general around this is an entrepreneur, especially a CEO, is often the center of the universe during the day.
And often not that great at listening because they are driven to a vision and a passion behind an idea.
That's right.
So they're usually the talker, not the listener.
Even if you're a good listener as a leader, you're still the center of the universe.
Yeah.
When you come home at the end of the day to your significant other, independent of what your significant other does, even if your significant other is an entrepreneur.
Yeah, another CEO or entrepreneur, yeah.
Okay, but especially if your significant other isn't a CEO or an entrepreneur, the last thing in the world your significant other wants you to show up as is the center of the universe.
They don't give a shit.
They don't give a shit.
Yeah.
And when you start putting yourself in their position, Amy's a writer, she's an introvert,
yeah.
She gets a lot of time alone, she has good friends, she works on serious things, but many of the serious things she works on are things that are solitary, and long stretches of time, where she's alone. She wants to have an engaged conversation. Sometimes she wants to know what's going on in my world, but she doesn't want me to show up and bring that.
Yeah, she wants you to show up as equal partner and life partner.
And engage. So that was another one that I had to learn very quickly, which was easy to learn.
Before we talk about some other things that you guys have done, let's fast forward to the end of the story. So you're 25 years in this relationship. When you think back over that time, how much time do we waste or use ineffectively or squander in our work, our profession, as entrepreneurs, as CEOs, as business leaders? Could we chop out 5% and it wouldn't make a difference? Could we chop out 25%? Some people say you could chop out 50% and you'd actually be further ahead of the game because you're not spending time on crap. So have you learned what you think that number is?
Yeah, I think it's a very large percentage of people's time, and I think it falls into a handful of different categories, and I think much of that impacts the relationship that you have with your significant other. There's a whole category of what I'll call just overhead, which is things that we create in our organization that become patterns that were useful at a point in time but continue to happen over and over again.
Meetings would be a good example. Meetings and reports.
But it's also things that go a level deeper, which is if you have an organization where you have a difficult time with conflict.
Yeah.
The cultural norm of your organization is one where conflict is a challenging thing. We could spend hours talking about the different types of challenges.
Yep.
One of the ways that organizations waste a lot of time in those situations is people spend a lot of time trying to justify their position through written stuff, through communication, through meetings, or they create a lot of situational activity that distracts from what the conflict is as a way to try to get people to get on the same page or some cliche like that.
Sure.
So there's a whole bucket of that, which is just activity that gets institutionalized as overhead. Second is we spend an enormous amount of our own time on things of not of our choosing. And one of the challenges, and it's a chronic challenge for an overscheduled person, is when you hit a point of being at a certain amount of work, you stop. Like even trying to sort for it. You're like, fuck it, I'm so busy.
Right. You just surrender to it and let it overwhelm you like a wave of an ocean.
And you let it choose what you're going to spend your time on versus you choosing what you're going to spend your time on.
So all this sounds, great, obvious, important. What is an entrepreneur to do? You don't always get to pick and choose. How often do you take a step back and make a significant difference in what it is you're doing? And how do you do that without turning your life upside down or your business upside down?
In the let me do it in the context of a relationship, because I think it's more tied to what we're talking about. In the context of a relationship, you can set very clear boundaries that give you space to both engage in your relationship, but also change the tempo of what's going on with your work so you can actually reflect on what you're spending time on.
So I don't take phone calls after 8 o'clock or whatever. I
don't take phone calls after 8 o'clock. My father, an example that he said that was a good example was he was a doctor. He was on call. So oftentimes in the evenings he'd have to do rounds or he'd have things that would happen. But he was home for dinner Monday through Friday with us every night, 6 o'clock.
It was just non-negotiable.
That was what he did. He was 6 o'clock for dinner. Every now and then he'd have something that like, Dad has a meeting tonight. It was a special thing, not a, oh, Dad's coming to dinner.
Was the exception, not the rule. Yeah.
That's right. Another example, and for me it comes from Jewish tradition. I grew up Jewish. I'm not religious, but it comes from that tradition, which is I like to call it a digital Sabbath, which is there's a whole percentage of the population that from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown doesn't work, doesn't engage. Takes it as a reflection. And many of the people who participate in that tradition are very successful entrepreneurs and very successful business
So they've been proof that it can work, and you can invest that time in the relationship.
They have a religious or a belief system motivation for it that enforces it. I've enforced that without that belief system motivation. I've just said, you know what? From Friday night to Saturday night, I'm not working. I'm not on my email. I'm going to spend time on what I want to spend time on. That might mean that I lay on the couch and read a bunch of stuff that is work-related. That might mean that I get together deliberately with some people, with Amy, that has a work context. But I'm not.
But you're still together.
We're together. I'm not on my email. I'm not taking phone calls. I'm not feeling the existential stress of the week. I'm giving myself that space and time. Now, there's a whole, a long, long list of these kinds of things. But as the entrepreneur, defining these for yourself and then building them in as rituals is even more important than being deliberate about what you choose to do. So here's another example, totally different. I tell this to people that go through Techstars who are away from their wife, husband, significant other, or kids. Right? So, you're at Techstars, and your family, whether it's a significant other or spouse and kids, for 90 days. And people say, well, I email, I text with my significant other, we do Skypes with the kids, a couple times a week. I'm like, awesome, do all that shit. Tomorrow, or on your way home from the office today, go buy a 24-hour store, buy 100 index cards. Tomorrow morning on your way in, stop by the post office and buy 100 stamps for a postcard. Sit at your desk for an hour and address all 100 of those cards. Just take an hour.
Bang it out.
Address them. While you're on a call that you don't want to be on, that you're having to listen to, address them. Put it by your bed. Either every morning or every night, write on the other side of that card a note to your family. And on the way into your office, drop it in a mailbox. You're
putting your life on autopilot, but not in a bad way. It's just a way of making it so easy to let them know that you're thinking of them.
Well, it lets them know you're thinking of them. You're going to think of them every single day when you wake up or when you go to bed, which is going to cause you to engage with them way more.
Right.
And if you don't have that signal, they're going to have time travel, which is every day they're going to open up the mailbox, and after about 3 or 4 days, they're going to have a steady stream of these physical things show up. And it's going to be from 4 days earlier, 3 days earlier, 2 days earlier. How awesome is that? Like, you create this way in the midst of our busyness to very, very deliberately think about your significant other. One last on this one. I let Amy choose the ringtone for my phone.
Just for her calls?
For her calls. So her ringtone, she chose it as the Imperial March. And whenever she calls, no matter what I'm doing, I take the call.
Literally, no matter what you're doing.
If she called right now, I would take the call.
I've been in a presentation and it rang on stage and you answered.
That's right. Now I'll say, hey, sweetie, I'm in front of 1,000 people. Can I call you back? Yep, call me back. Like, we know the negotiation is clear. Right? If I have time to talk, I say I got time to talk. If I say I'm going to call her back, I call her back. But you create these rhythms that allow your emotional connection to transcend the busyness.
I see. So
a second order effect for me of that is that it refocuses me on that person. Just by talking about that with you now, I'm going to go to dinner after we get done. I have a dinner at a restaurant across the street. I'm going to get off the phone with you, and I'm going to call her because I thought about it. Now, I might have called her anyway because I had 5 or 10 minutes to go to my dinner, but it just reinforces that because you've got those pathways where you're thinking of your partner all the time.
You're really retraining the brain in a positive way. Is there an electronic way that you and Amy stay in touch that you actually do feel is communication? You know, some people, like you said, from Techstars, email and video and texting. Is there one that you and she have actually found is a good tool, or they all are bad?
Yeah. Well, it varies. The things that are our current rhythm are we love to wake up together. We love to go to bed together. And so when we're not in the same physical play, when we're home together, we literally get into bed together, and when one of us wakes up, typically the other wakes up.
Yeah.
We FaceTime first thing in the morning when the first person wakes up, or when we're going to bed. We get the time zones right. So whoever's up the better side of the time zone is the one initiating the call.
Yeah.
It's utterly hilarious when we screw that up. And
it's the middle of the night.
It's like it's 1 o'clock in the morning. Whatever.
Yeah.
But we do that, and then the other is we try to be very playful rather than serious throughout the day. So there's plenty of real communication. We have emails back and forth that are real communication, text messages back and forth that are real communication, phone calls are real communication. But even at 50, 51, and 50, we're pretty into emojis.
Yeah.
And I'm not totally sure what the strings of emojis she sends to me sometimes, but I send her back a random string of emojis. Right? It's allowing yourself to be playful with each other.
Yeah.
In that communication, not one-dimensional playful, not like they're the sickness, lovey-dovey, can't stand them, saccharine sweet things.
But unique ways to stay in touch.
Lots of random different stuff, and that playfulness in the midst of the activity, like, hey, can you, on your way home tonight, can you do this?
Yeah.
Is just as important a message as 3 big red purple cards.
Right. When Apple introduced the Apple Watch and they had all these features for staying in touch, and at first I was kind of bemused by it, but it is important to find these ways to leverage technology to touch the people that are important to you.
Yeah, another one that's like that for us is Fitbit. We each have Fitbits, and we regularly do challenges throughout the week with a handful of other people, and there's plenty of trash talking back and forth of us verbally about, hey, I got 13,000 steps today.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
You give each other a hard time.
Yeah, and so it's allowing the playfulness to be on trivial stuff.
Yeah.
Rather than you have a limited amount of time, so everything you have to spend your time on is serious because you have a limited amount of time together. That gets really tedious and tiresome for both partners. In the
couple minutes remaining, I have to ask you the question that every listener wants to know, to the extent that you feel comfortable answering. Is there room in a relationship with an entrepreneur for any kind of sex life whatsoever? To the extent that you want to tell us, how do you make that even possible?
Well, it depends which side of the Woody Hall or the Annie Hall. 3 times a week's a lot, or 3 times a week's is not enough.
Depends what side you're on.
Of course there is, and it's also I think important to recognize the normal arcs of whatever intimacy is in a relationship over time. So, the sexual activity that you have as a couple, and I won't pretend to be whatever. What was it?
Dr. Ruth Westheimer.
I won't pretend to have that philosophy. But one of the key things that are indicators of unhealth in a relationship is lack of sexual activity.
Sure. It's usually a sign of something else.
It's usually a sign of something else in the context of the relationship, right? Conflict points, right? Sex is used as a weapon. Money is used as a weapon.
Yep.
So, what for us, we enjoy each other. The intimacy on lots of dimensions, right? One of our favorite things to do that doesn't involve a classical definition of sex is we love to lay on the couch together and both read. right? That's a great intimacy.
That's an intimacy for you. Yeah.
And so, is that more important than, we just saw, what was it, Deepwater Horizon?
Yeah, yeah.
And a great scene at the beginning. Marky Mark says to his...
I don't think he goes by Marky Mark anymore, but anyway, go ahead.
That's what I call him. He's Marky Mark to me. They're sort of flirting at the beginning, and he's about to go away, and, she wants, she's like pulling him back into bed, and he's like, all right, do you want the 30, 60, or 90-second love package?
Oh, my God.
She says, I'll take the whole 90 seconds. Right? I mean, the intimacy covers a lot of dimensions behind, just intercourse.
Yeah.
Or whatever the equivalent of that is.
Yeah.
And I think that notion of intimacy, at least for me and Amy, is it's not transcendent where the physical act of sex is not important, but the arc of intimacy is the tell.
Right.
And for us, if we find ourselves not having that emotional intimacy that would naturally lead to sexual activity, that's fine. By the way, at 51, there are many moments that I couldn't imagine my 14-year-old self ever saying. My 14-year-old self.
Yeah. Of course.
Like to be laying in bed, naked, at the end of the day, and it'd be like, good night.
Yeah, I'm going to sleep.
I'm going to sleep. Like your 14-year-old be like,
no way.
But like that's just part of life, and that's okay because you can still have the intimacy in the mix of that.
But one of the biggest things I take away is that it sounds like you and Amy have developed this language. I don't even want to call it a set of rules, but this rules
language is a good word.
Rules of engagement in a very positive way, not a warlike kind of way, about what's important to each, how you can find the overlap, what you're not willing to negotiate and carve out that time, whether it's your trips every year, your dinners every month, etc. It sounds like you early on entered the danger and were pretty open and honest about that. Maybe because you were forced to when she brought that up and said, I'm done.
Yeah, we were forced to. And I think language is a good word for it because it's a bunch of different things. Some of it's rules.
Yeah.
Right? Some of it's values. Right? We each have incredibly deep respect for each other.
Yep.
Truth is, value number one. There are things that are outlawed. Physical violence of any sort is not permitted in our relationship.
Yep.
Emotional violence is not accepted in a relationship.
No passive aggressive bullshit. Right.
That's right. There are things that, physical violence it can't happen. Emotional. I'm sure I say things that piss her off. She says things that piss me off.
Yeah. But it's on a rare occasion.
But when it happens, you have to acknowledge that it hurt.
Yeah.
You have to then talk about it. That's part of the language.
Yeah.
And the other person might be defensive immediately, but it doesn't defend and then dig in. It's like, you know what? If you felt hurt by that, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. Or I'm sorry, I meant to hurt you because I was really in a bad mood because I was angry at you because of this thing.
Yeah.
I'm angry at you because of this thing.
Let's focus on why I'm angry, not this thing.
I'm sorry that I did this thing that made you angry, but it wasn't okay that, right? Like it's being able to work through that.
Yeah.
And over a long period of time, I think in relationships you trend either positive or negative, right? That stuff starts to routinize. And for someone for an entrepreneur who is in a business where you're constantly trying to improve your business on all dimensions, right? Your job as the entrepreneur, you think about how can I make my business better all the time.
And if you apply those skills to the relationship, apply those things that you're good at, which is how do I improve, what metrics do I use, what rules do I put in place, systematize, and put that in place with the relationship, it sounds like it can make a huge difference.
Makes a huge difference, but remember, you're not the center of the universe.
Yeah.
You're not the boss. You're now having to deal with an equal partner.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of co-founders don't make it. Same thing here.
Exactly.
Well, yeah. Brad, I've known you for a long time, not as long as Amy, but you're such a mensch and so kind to share, enter the danger with us today.
Jeff, any chance I get to talk to you about love is a good day.
I agree with you. I love you too.
I love you too.
So thank you. How can people learn more about you and Foundry Group and get their hands on this amazing book that you and Amy put together?
So the book is called Startup Life. You can buy it on Amazon, or if you go to startuprev.com, it's a website with all my books on it. I'm just Brad at Feld, Feld.com. I'm Twitter at bfeld. I try to respond to all my email. If you do send me something by email, do me a favor, start with the punchline.
Yeah.
and say where you heard it. I heard about you on Jeff's podcast.
They'll say, I love you. I love the podcast.
Yeah, I love the podcast.
Great.
Perfect. But start with the punchline.
Great.
Think of a guy who gets, hundreds of emails a day and tries to just process through it.
Fantastic. Brad, thank you so much for making the time.